Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Film Fanclub Show. I am Sam Carrico. We've got a great show for you, as always today, but we are starting on a little bit of a somber note. Yeah, I just found out that apparently I'm not going to be playing the next Superman. I guess it's going to a guy named David Corenswet. I'm starting to think they're not going to restore the Snyderverse, are they? Lois Lane will be played by the actress Rachel Brosnahan, who previously starred in the series Marvelous Ms. Maisel. The press release didn't mention that though, because DC wasn't sure if they could legally use the term marvelous. I understand the change in direction for DC though, because things certainly aren't good where they stand. The Flash movie, have you seen this? Because you would be the only one that did if you did. The new Flash movie has suffered a 73% drop in ticket sales, going from its first to second weekend at the box office. Yeah, that is horrible, my gosh. Maybe next time Barry can outrun those bad reviews. The Barbie movie is coming, and the cast and crew have been out doing press for the new film. Here they are at a red carpet event. Notably, everyone is wearing neutral colors, except Margot Robbie. She's wearing pink, looking like a customizable character in a video game cutscene. The marketing for the film is also ramping up. Guests can now book a stay at Barbie's Malibu Dream House. Nightly rates are currently unknown, but I guess the cost covers the view, the pool, and bulldozing all of the low-income housing in the neighborhood. And on the topic of things that feel, and on the topic of things that feel fake and manufactured, the Idol series on HBO has come to a close. I'm still not sure if I'm going to do a whole bonus episode or not on it, but the basic bottom line is that the series was bad. The whole thing just feels like a vanity project for the weekend. He produces the show, provides the soundtrack, and even co-writes the episodes. And I don't know why he's helping write the show. He can't even write music. But hey, his name's Abel, not capable. And as if we needed more tragedy in our lives, the Titanic movie is returning to Netflix. Several people are saying this is too soon though, only a couple weeks on now from the Titan sub-tragedy, but others say this is the perfect time to revisit the 1997 film. Because nothing says relaxing movie night like a reminder of rich people dying in a submarine. Let's move on to something more exciting though. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is in theaters as we speak. One of the things that has people talking was the use of CGI to make Harrison Ford appear younger in certain scenes. But get this, originally I was up for the role of young Indiana Jones before they decided to go in a different direction. We even have some footage, check it out.
I miss waking up every morning, wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
I don't believe in magic, but a few times in my life, I've seen things I can't explain. And I've come to believe it's not so much what you believe, it's how hard you believe it.
Yeah, I guess they decided to change course when they realized it would be cheaper to have CGI than to have me on set. And I'm kidding, this is obviously a parody. We have to make sure we say that for legal purposes. Kathleen Kennedy would never hire me. Okay, we've got a great show for you lined up. Ian Simmons is the editor-in-chief of Kickseat.com, and he's the creator of Kicking the Seat on YouTube. I spoke to him about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Let's get right to our discussion. Ian, how are you, man?
I'm doing great and really happy to be here to talk about this movie, which I'm not as happy about, but I'm happy to talk about it with you.
That's what I've been trying to say to so many people. I saw this with my dad, my grandpa. We were excited to see it. We had so much fun watching it and talking about it. But then we walk out of the theater and they look to me and they say, "How did you like it?" And I said, "It was horrible." So it's amazing. And I love that you're excited to talk about it too, even though you didn't like the movie. It sounds like. But I'm going to predict that maybe you didn't like the movie. I want to ask though, what's your initial reaction?
For me, this is a checkbox movie. You know, it's a cliche to say that there are only really 3 Indiana Jones movies, those being the ones from the 80s, you know, Raiders, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. Crystal Skull, kind of like an afterthought. And then this movie, yeah, I can say that I've seen it. I can say that I never have to see it again. And it was quite kind of a chore to watch. And amazingly, my wife, who I saw it with, sometimes we kind of differ on things. She's a lot more forgiving on movies because she doesn't have that like critic's eye. And that's not a knock on her. In fact, I sometimes wish that I didn't have the critic's eye so I could just kind of enjoy things. On the entire car ride back home, including stopping to get dinner, she was just like, and what about this? And what about this? And this was dumb. And that was, what did this happen? So yeah, we were on the same page for once.
That was me in the car ride with my grandpa. I was like, then this happened, and then why did they do this with Indiana Jones? Okay, so off the top, we have to talk about like what something you said, nothing is ever going to come close to the original 3 movies. I think it's pretty clear. I wasn't hoping for that with this movie. I was hoping for better than Crystal Skull. And this is not better than Crystal Skull. And the thing with Crystal Skull is it is a step down. It is arguably a bad movie. I have fun with it now, kind of in the same way I have fun with the Star Wars prequels. But like the Star Wars prequels, that's George and Steven Spielberg doing a bad movie. They're allowed to do a bad movie, in my opinion, because they're the creators of this franchise. The hubris of Disney to hire James Mangold and for them to come together and be like, we will correct Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, much like they did with Star Wars. It's the same thing all over again. They're like, we're going to correct the Indiana Jones franchise and give you the true ending that you wanted. And they gave us this. Holy shit. I did not like this film. Some of the decisions they make were horrible. From the beginning of the film, the decisions they made were horrible. And then by the end of the film, they made even worse decisions with where to take this character, this franchise. It just felt so much like aliens in an Indiana Jones movie in Crystal Skull. It just is one of those things, doesn't feel like it should be an Indiana Jones movie. There are some things in this movie that take that and just blow it out of the water. I believe there was another, I can't remember what was my nuke the fridge moment in this movie, but there were some things that Indiana Jones survives in this movie that were way worse than the nuke the fridge moment in Crystal Skull. So it's like the hubris of saying this is going to be better and then to make it just a billion times worse. I was pretty blown away by how bad this movie was. And I'm trying not to be hyperbole,
No, and that's totally fair. I wish I had the anger towards the movie, the energy that you seem to have. My reaction was just kind of like, I'm getting through this. I was much more animated in the car talking to my wife last night, and probably, as this conversation goes on, maybe I'll get a little bit worked up, but there was just nothing thrilling about it. I'm sitting there watching the seams because there's a lot of, and maybe this has to do with a lot of the problems that Disney's been having with their effects house and reshoots and all that other stuff, but there's just so much. You can't watch this movie, honestly, I don't think, and not see the gaping flaws in the way that it's presented and have that pull you out of the story and naturally think back to what they did in the 1980s, which, I've heard people say, well, it's supposed to be cheesy because it's a throwback to the cheesy serials. And like, no, what Lucas and Spielberg did with, Raiders and the subsequent 2 movies is they took the spirit of those films and invested them with the modern day to them technology and the improvements in acting and that kind of stuff. It was not meant to be something where you could see all the holes. We might look at some of that stuff now and think, oh, there's some matte shots that look a little bit dated, but overall, because of the practicality, the physicality, the believability of those characters and the stories and the time that they were set, you can watch those and be like, this could have been made today. This movie has no reason to exist. It is literally just Lucasfilm, humping another IP into the ground. Indy got his send-off in 1989 with Last Crusade. I can forgive Crystal Skull, although I haven't watched it in the 15 years since it came out, because I saw it in the theater. I'm like, I get what this movie has to offer, and I reject it. But I at least respect it. To your point earlier, that was Steven Spielberg coming back and kind of putting the nail in the coffin, or like shutting the lid and saying, look, here's a final Indiana Jones adventure again. And the audience being like, we don't need this. So that's fine. It's at least the guy who started it wanted to finish it for a second time and prove that it didn't need to be finished again. But yeah, to your point, coming back and saying, hey, we've got, and I don't know exactly who or what to believe. There's been internet rumors for months about reshoots and original endings and, all this other stuff that the filmmakers and Lucasfilm have denied. Having watched the movie, I can say that I don't believe anything those shills have to say, because this thing looks like there is a very clear, distinct point. I mean, literally a blackout where you're like, insert original ending here that the test audiences that apparently don't exist hated and rejected outright, and here's the tacked on ending, the last 10 minutes that we decided to put in. So yeah, it's a compromised movie, it's a bad movie, it's unexciting, there's no pulse in it.
And the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character, just while we're not on spoilers, all we could say, I hated her. So, you know, I don't know if there's much to say there.
You know, it's funny because this is a constant theme on my show, and looking back on, well, say modern blockbusters, but also going back through the years at some older films, because there is this idea of the strong female lead as if that's something that is new, that needs to be pushed to the fore because movies have never, you know, given women their fair shake, and that's a lie. I mean, if you look, you can look at films back that are 40, 50, 60 years old and find, you know, well-defined, charismatic, powerful, you know, women in lead and supporting roles. So I don't know where this idea comes from, but I can say that Phoebe Waller-Bridge and a lot of the characters that come out of, you know, Disney Lucasfilm, frankly, they are not strong female characters. They are, I'm going to use the U word, they are unlikable, you know, kind of like very hyper masculinized characters that come in and bulldoze right past the men. I mean, if you look at the formula of this, you look at the Star Wars sequels, and you've got Harrison Ford's character Han Solo, divorced from the person that, you know, in the previous film where we left things off, they were happily getting together, head over heels in love. They had a couple of kids. We catch up with them decades later. They're divorced. He's bitter, sad, you know, doesn't really care about where he's going, and all because they lost. Well, I don't want to get into spoilers, but something happened. Something happened with their son that caused this big rift, and then there's like one last big go round. But you got to, you know, get the old man out of the dumps, and that's not at all the character that we left behind 40 years ago. The version of him that we loved. You can say the same thing about Luke Skywalker. Honestly, you know, I didn't watch Willow, but I kind of understand that they did some kind of the same thing there. So it's like, what IP does Lucasfilm have left to, or modern Lucasfilm have left to kill? Right. But yeah, I look at Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character as just like, the filmmakers want her to represent something that I don't think she does well at all, because I don't see women watching this movie. I'm not one, obviously, but my wife kind of shares the same sentiment, watching this and thinking, this is the kind of person I want to be. You know, I want to bulldoze through everybody. I want to just like be, you know, smiling and having one-liners at every situation, including wildly inappropriate ones. I don't want to have any problems or emotions really until the script clearly calls for me to have them out of the blue. Yeah, it's not good. You look at Karen Allen's character in Raiders, even look at Willie Scott in Temple of Doom. You look at, was it Allison Doody, I think, played Ilsa in, you know, Last Crusade.
Yeah,
right?
She was not morally, you know, she was a Nazi, right?
Right. I know, but she did have some chemistry. You know, there was a relationship there with Indy, and she is a complicated character. Yes, she's a Nazi, but she's kind of caught up in this whole like weird situation of greed. And Indy does try and save her at the end because he sees something redemptive in her. And that's a shade that you don't really see given to characters like that. So there's something going on with the female leads in this series up until this point that's like, no, they were not strong female characters. Here's what a real strong female character. I'm like, no, that's one of the weakest female characters I've seen in a movie in a long time.
Yeah, she's not the way I would think. Thank you for hitting on the Marion Ravenwood thing, because that's the one to, or not one to one, but that is the where my mind immediately goes. You want strong female lead in an Indiana Jones movie, the very first movie, Marion Ravenwood, and the way I would describe. I keep wanting to call her Allison. Her name's not Allison, it's Helena. The way I would describe Helena is she's not strong. She's just an asshole. You know, they think that being an asshole is being a strong female lead, and frankly, it feels very insulting to women. But I'm not a woman, so I can't say that. But that's how it looks on the outside looking in.
Well, it's also kind of insulting to men, because there's almost like an idea that this is a reaction to like, oh, if men can be like this, women can be like this too. I'm like, I don't see these classic movies that people are trying to correct with this archetype, where they have these one-dimensional asshole guys, and it's like, this is the model of what a man is. No, they have their own vulnerabilities. They might be kind of roguish and, you know, get into trouble like Indiana Jones or Han Solo, but there are people that you would want to know and spend time with in a certain degree, and they are good people, but they're flawed people. Helena Shaw is, when it comes down to it, not a good person for reasons that I'm sure we'll get into when we get to the point-by-point breakdown.
So yeah, let me throw up the spoiler banner so people just listening to the podcast version should know that we are in spoilers now. I'm going to go through, like I said, I'm going to go through the movie kind of scene by scene, not necessarily scene by scene. I'll go through kind of chunks at a time, but feel free to interject if you need to, and of course I'll throw to you once I get through some stuff. So we'll begin with the 1944 prologue. I like this for the most part. I like seeing this is something we'll touch on again later. I like seeing Indiana Jones throughout history that he lived through. And now that we're not limited by Harrison Ford, whatever ages he is at the time, you can theoretically put Indiana Jones at the end of World War II. And I'm like, that's fun. Sure. I think they played that up and they used it to its potential. I liked that as the opening scene. The CGI on Harrison Ford starts out good and then very much goes through and up and down like hills and valleys. And then we also get the introduction of Toby Jones as Indiana Jones's best friend in the film. Indiana Jones is like a new best friend every single movie. They introduce like, hey, my lifelong friend, Indy, so it's like, okay. But I guess that's kind of goes with the serialized format of the episodic format of the franchise to a degree. But that's basically what I wanted to say about the first chunk. What did you think of those three things? The whole prologue in World War II, the CGI, particularly on Harrison Ford. And then I did like the Toby Jones. I think they did have chemistry as friends.
Maybe. I mean, that's the thing, is I was so distracted by I'm going to call it bad CGI, because in parts it looks photorealistic to a successfully de-aged Harrison Ford, but I'm calling it bad because it's not consistent. Now, maybe that's unfair because this technology is still in its infancy. By the time we get to Indiana Jones 19, where they have a completely AI generated Harrison Ford, I'm sure it'll look like completely convincing. But for right now, I'm watching it. I'm just completely distracted by going from a convincing face to when he starts to speak, it's the 80-year-old Harrison Ford voice, slightly modulated coming out of his mouth, which is distracting because Indy in 44 wouldn't have sounded like that, because Last Crusade was probably a year or two before this adventure, which is weird because he looks younger here than he did in that movie, which was 2 years earlier. Anyway, as he's moving through scenes, you can see that when he turns his face, you can see like the bit of the rubberiness, the light doesn't hit correctly, especially as they're cutting from close-ups of him doing stuff to Toby Jones or Mad Mikkelsen or other people. You can see, oh yes, that's how a real human face reacts to light and movement and expression. The other inconsistency is if you look at the big shocking reveal of who's the guy with the bag on his head, not to mention the fact that it's in the trailers, but we see a young Indiana Jones. The closing scene of that prologue is another close-up of Indy where he's like, his face is right in the camera. I'm like, this looks like a younger Indiana Jones who's about 20 years older than the guy that we saw in movie time 20 minutes earlier, or however long that chase scene was. So the age of the character or the actor changes from scene to scene almost in this prologue. So I was so distracted that I would need to watch this movie again, which I vow I'd never do, to see if there is any chemistry between, stand-in actor with probably a green ball in his head and Toby Jones.
Okay, so we get to 1969. Indiana Jones is now a sad old man who lives by himself in an apartment, who yells at other kids whenever they're celebrating going to the moon landing. I like, not the kids, but, America. And so I like the idea of there's something to be said, a little bit of commentary on like, hey, be nice to the cranky old man that lives next door because you don't know what he's been through. I like that to a degree. But when we're doing it with Indiana Jones, and then it's like you're getting iffy. You're kind of making my hero. You don't meet your heroes. You don't want to see your heroes go to the bathroom. You don't want to see your heroes be a sad old man who waking up shirtless because they fell asleep watching Johnny Carson or whatever. 1969, Johnny Carson. Yeah, that's right. Separate. So this is where I get into even more. They're on thin ice already, but now we find out he's divorced from Marion, and I don't know if we find out at this time, but we'll mention it now. Mutt has died in Vietnam, and he's being forced into retirement. So his whole life sucks now, basically.
Right. The thing with Mutt, who is Shia LaBeouf from the previous film, they mentioned that he died, but I don't think it's until later in the film.
Okay.
Kind of spoilery, we're talking about like, what would you do if you could go back in time? And he said, I would tell my son not to enlist. And that's the one bit of subtlety I think this movie has, is forcing the audience to kind of piece it together of what happened to Mutt. If you didn't know already going in. But it's these broken down heroes that we see. It's like Whiplash, because let's take Crystal Skull out of the equation. But if the last time you saw Indy was Last Crusade, he's riding off into the sunset. He's a
Yeah.
virile young man. Even at the end of Crystal Skull, he's found love with he's finally found the love of his life again,
Right.
Marion. And now he's just like, "Brr, brr, everything's terrible." Like, no, this is not a heroic aspirational figure anymore.
Even at the beginning of Crystal Skull, I don't think that his life was as bad as is in this movie. Like they go out of their way to be like, yeah, everybody at school, like at where he works, nobody respects him there. They all want him gone. Like he doesn't even connect with students anymore. Think about the first Indiana Jones. Whenever obviously you can't do that today. It'd be a little wrong for several reasons, but especially because Harrison Ford's age. But this again, taking a character that is aspirational, something that we look up to, that is a titan of cinema, and then being like, nope, sad old man, deconstructing. I should have added deconstruction to my checklist, but then now we're going to deconstruct him. Do we need to see Indiana Jones deconstructed in a way that makes him just look pathetic?
No, we don't. And one of the things I thought has kind of rewriting the movie in my head on the drive home, and I don't remember enough about Crystal Skull. Maybe you can keep me honest here, but I love the duality of Indiana Jones. He's a college professor of archaeology, and then on the weekends, or if he takes a vacation or something, he's swinging around the world fighting people trying to retrieve artifacts. I would love if they really got into the duality of that. Open with him in 69, he's kind of the sad old man going to his retirement party or whatever, and nobody respects him and everything. But then he gets on a plane and then he brings out the hat and the fedora, and then he's off to screw your people. This is it's always the Bruce Wayne Batman thing. He has to throw people off so no one catches on that he's still a renowned adventurer. Or maybe his exploits in the last 30 plus years, whatever, have come out and he's a celebrated, adventuring archaeologist. Maybe that causes problems because now, like the Hunter Thompson thing, when he gets so big, he can no longer be the journalist on the street because he's recognized, or his contacts dissolve or are killed because they know that they're working with the great Indiana Jones. What is this nonsense in Dial of Destiny?
Holy shit. I love how, okay, so I'm just, it's very funny because I'm like, I wrote all these notes, and then meanwhile, you're like, I haven't really thought about the movie that much. And I throw to you and you're like, anyways, here's basically a draft for a better movie. I'm like, oh my God. So I love that. The idea of okay, it's all gone to his head. There's nothing left for him to do. Maybe he is a little bit bored. Maybe even his personal life is in shambles. But then maybe you mix those two ideas. Maybe his personal life is in shambles, but because he's gotten so big for his own britches, because his exploits have come out, and now you got to deal with the famous Indiana Jones versus the covert Indiana Jones. These are much better things. But again, they wanted to Jake Skywalker him. They wanted him to be no, he failed. He wasn't able to bring back the Jedi, and now he's gone into hiding. They wanted to just do that copy paste. And it feels so tired at this point.
And I want to step in for a second because I am a big defender of The Last Jedi. I understand everybody's problems with that movie, but I like the idea of it and the spirit of it. I don't mind a broken down Luke Skywalker, but I think you get to do that once. You get to do that once, 6-7 years ago or whenever that movie came out. But to see this recurring theme coming back in pop culture, I'm like, no, stop it. Let your heroes be heroes.
So we talk about Indy retiring. Now we get to Helena's introduction. We see whenever he is teaching one of his last classes, we see Helena's the only one that can really answer, because again, they just have to go out of the way to show all the other kids don't respect Indiana Jones anymore. Except for Helena. She pretends to respect him, pretends to be interested in his exploits, pretends to be interested in the father's dial or whatever, and then she uses Indiana Jones to get to the dial. And I'm trying to make sure that basically I just want to talk about Helena's introduction, the little switcheroo that she pulls and how much of an asshole she is. I know this might be a little bit redundant, but if there's anything we haven't said about her introduction, if you want to say, I hate her.
No, I mean, well, first of all, the Dial of Destiny, for anyone who doesn't know, because I don't know if we actually spelled out what it is. It's this artifact from Archimedes, who created it, and essentially, I won't get into exactly what it ends up being because that's kind of spoilery, and it's towards the end.
Yeah, they say it can change the course of history is the vague way they put it, I think.
Right. So film parlance, it's a time travel MacGuffin. So she's kind of after it. Her father went crazy looking for it, which again is as much as this movie wants to tell its own story, it so picks from other Indiana Jones films. We had the crazy professor played by John Hurt, I think, Crystal Skull. Here's another idol of Indy's who went crazy. I'm like, I get it. We've been here. But yeah, she knows everything. She's not a very nice person. And I was talking to my wife about this. She said, well, it was the guilt that Indy felt as her godfather for sort of abandoning her at a young age to live with her, natural dad, that kept him coming back and trying to help her. But he keeps trying to help her after she has literally locked him in a room with Nazis who are trying to kill both of them.
Yes.
So that she can get away. And I think that's the first of like maybe 3 instances throughout the film where she just either leaves him or almost deliberately tries to cause his death, and he has to get out of it because he's Indiana Jones. But I'm like, no, she is really the villain of this piece. I mean, there are Nazis in this movie that I understood more because the lead guy wanted to do something, which was, we got to kind of talk spoilers here, but trust me, I'm not standing up for Nazis. I'm just saying the lead Nazi's motivation was better than the alleged female lead of this movie's motivation.
That is a huge failing on the writers of this film. Yeah, to make Helena so poorly developed and unlikable that it just, yeah. See, that's a great point, because I completely forgot, because I'm so focusing on something that happens later involving Helena and the Nazis, but that was really despicable for me, that I almost forgot about. This is even worse, arguably. She leaves her godfather to die, to be killed, and he does get captured. Like they could have shot him to death. And right then and there, and they're basically lucky that she's lucky that Indiana Jones has plot armor. Otherwise, she would have caused the death of her godfather at the hand of fucking Nazis. That's despicable.
Listen, I'm glad you brought this up. I have to rewind a bit to the opening sequence because I learned something. This is new information from Indiana Jones. He's a mutant with mutant powers, because in the opening prologue, he gets captured by the Nazis and is ordered to be hung. They try and hang him from inside this building, and they string him up with a noose. He gets his hands free so he can not choke to death immediately. But as he's hanging there, starting to twitch, a bomb falls to the roof, and then it lands on the floor, and then it goes to the other floor and all this other stuff. There's a giant explosion that takes out all the other Nazi soldiers in the room with him. And he doesn't emerge with so much as a burn mark, singed eyebrows. His clothes are completely intact, and he's fine. And then Mads Mikkelsen's character, the Nazi scientist, there's a big, there's a fight on the top of the train, which is in, the trailers and all that stuff. But at the end, he ends up the train is moving at 70 miles an hour, however long it's speeding along this track in the rain, in the nighttime. He gets whacked on the head and knocked off the train in a move that would kill anybody. And yet he shows up later as the villain of the piece. Again, no disfigurement, no limp, no, I don't think he had a limp.
That's a great point. 2 things about Mads Mikkelsen. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, Indiana Jones, that might have been my nuke the fridge moment whenever he survives that explosion and is completely fine. And then also Indiana Jones gets shot several times in this film. This comes back later. He gets shot at the train scene briefly. And I thought that's the joke you were going for. Apparently he's Wolverine because it just heals instantly because he doesn't recover. I mean, and then later on he gets shot again and he should fucking be dead, but he's not. What was I going to say about Mads Mikkelsen? Thank you. Yeah, they don't even acknowledge that he is Indiana Jones has aged so much between 1944 and 1969. Mads Mikkelsen, they give a gray streak of hair, and I think that's very funny. Not to mention, yeah, like you mentioned, he should be dead. He absolutely should be dead because he was, they were going like 70 miles an hour and gets hit by metal and knocked off of a train. He should be smashed to death.
Into a chasm in the woods or something. I can't remember where exactly they were, but it didn't look like the easiest place to crawl out of, especially if you've got at least a concussion.
And that's a great trope for these movies too. The villain comes back, and has some sort of scar, something that is oh, now he's suffered and now he's taken all this time to regroup and now he's back. But no, it was. I keep referencing the Pitch Meetings YouTube channel, and it was, super easy, barely an inconvenience. So that's a great channel. Shout out. It's not ripping it off if I'm doing a shout out. So
no, I love that channel. Ryan does some great stuff.
What I like about the use of the villain in the film, who is a Nazi, is that I was like, how are they going to include the Nazis in present day or 1969? And he's part of Operation Paperclip. And that's kind of interesting because that is a real thing that happened in the United States history. They brought over Nazis and had them work in places like NASA. And who would have thought that could ever go wrong?
You almost sounded like you said NASA, which I'm sure that's going to be a meme now.
Yeah, it's earned into from NASA to NASA. Oh God, that's fun with a N-A-Z-A. Oh God, damn, that's a good joke. And then there's an action escape. I think that's where I'm talking about, or you kind of briefly mentioned it. Indiana Jones has to escape being left for dead by his goddaughter Helena, which leads him to leads him to a parade. The villains of the film do some crazy thing. They have some crazy tactics here by shooting directly into a crowd, shooting in the air, so everybody knows there's gunfire happening. It's like without masks or anything. They have the CIA working with them, which they play very fast and loose with. I'm not quite sure the link. They play fast and loose with that a little bit. Some of the action scene I do like the iconography of Indiana Jones on a horse at any time, like whether it's Last Crusade or him riding through in an action scene. It does get a little, what I'm sensing from you is you didn't like something about it, and if I had to guess, is it because Harrison Ford's 80 years old?
No, I mean, he is a real life adventurer. He flies planes and he's very physical. No complaints there. My issue was seeing this on the big screen, not IMAX, but I don't know that for sure this was filmed using the volume, the big thing that Marvel has been famously doing for their CGI and soundstage stuff. But it takes place during the parade, this big set piece. And I swear it looked like you've got Indiana Jones and a horse and one of the Nazi henchmen, and then like a line of chorus girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like they were standing on a street that had been digitally filled in against a backdrop that was digitally filled in of like an actual parade. And nothing looked real to me until he takes the horse down into the subway station. The lighting's all wrong. It's all like, hey, we got these giant spotlights shining off the tops of people's heads to make it look like it's daylight, but the light isn't hitting anything else in the scene in that way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm just when I'm not invested in a movie, that's why I'm talking about. I'm looking at the edge of the screen to find the seams.
I thought they used the volume. The time at which point I think they used the volumes came later. In a very big thing that I hated a lot about it. Big sequence that I think everybody's going to hate in the film. But I was taken out particularly because I was like, are they on a stage right now? Is everything else fake? And the director, James Mangold, who I loved his work on Logan, great director at times. He said, we really emphasize practical effects on this movie. And I'm like, you could have fooled me. Because I didn't, I already talked about Indiana Jones on a horse. I thought that was, I think it's a fun action scene. I think it escalates well. Indiana Jones is wanted for murder at this point, though, which I think this is a very weird plot point, especially the fact that we can kind of talk about it a little bit if you want. It doesn't really get resolved, does it?
Was it the murder of the secretary?
I believe so, yeah. He's wanted for the murder, I believe, of the people in the college that the Nazis killed. But that feels like very flimsy framing logic, but also the fact that it goes nowhere really pisses me off.
Right. I totally forgotten about that until you brought it up. Like frame for that college thing. Yeah, that 5 minutes of this 2.5 hour movie that goes nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Yeah, it's just point out goes nowhere, and I think that also it would have been tied up if they did what I think was the original ending of this film, because then he wouldn't have had to deal with that anymore, the repercussions of anything going on in present day. You've talked a lot about how they have a formula down at this point, and this is whenever I, in my theater, started to notice this is just part of a formula. Sala comes in when Indiana Jones is at his lowest, and he does nothing except take him from point A to point B and provide exposition along the way. And I'm like, oh my God, this is Lando Calrissian and Rise of Skywalker. Oh my God, this is any other legacy character that shows up for a cameo just to provide information like a fucking video game and then send the characters on their way. And Sala does come back at the end later in the reshoot, but other than that, it's like, yeah, he's just there to provide exposition. Do you want to mention anything on Sala before we go to Tangier?
Well, you mentioned point A to point B. Literally, he drives in there because, the great Sala is a cab driver in New York now. And Indy got him and his family out during the war. He was like a big mover and shaker in Egypt or whatever during, Raiders and then Last Crusade. It's been a while since I watched those movies, in fairness, but it just didn't seem to me like, I don't know what circumstance could bring this guy. Not that there's anything wrong with being a cab driver, but to being, just trying to provide for his family in that way. I'd still think he'd be a guy of like connections and means no matter where he ended up on the globe. And they don't really comment on that. Like, yeah, I'm just doing this now. I'm like, what? No.
Oh, they were like, say, hey, it's time for you to say some lines for the trailer.
Give him hell, Indiana Jones.
Literally back to back.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And that's another thing too that took me out. I'm like, he's wanted for murder right now. You should not be screaming that. Like, oh my gosh. But yeah, the back to back, I missed the desert, I missed the sea. That would like from the first trailer, and then Give Him Hell, from the second trailer. I'm like, you just had him, you just fed him lines. I bet the director was just off camera, just like, now say this. All right, now give us a take of this. It's like, ugh. All right, so we got solid exposition. It's a play on Basil exposition. Solid exposition. Tangier auction. The Tangier auction, yeah, because Helena's an asshole. She stole the dial, went to Tangier, where she's going to auction it off to whoever. She doesn't give a fuck. She doesn't care. She doesn't have any morals. Strong female character. There's an auto rickshaw chase that as they're all escaping. The rickshaw, I think, is the little cart they were in.
It's called a tuk-tuk, yeah.
Okay, whatever it is. I saw it online. So that their little cart thing, I'm going to call it cart thing. And they're jumping from back and forth. Again, Indiana Jones is 80 years old at this point. She's an asshole. She doesn't want. She's just trying to escape from him the entire time because she's like, oh, and she has a fun joke about how you stole it, then he stole it, and then I stole it. It's called capitalism. Got to get that in there. And then basically the sequence ends with, I think now the CIA has lost faith in Voller and he goes rogue and takes over, which is a little bit, I guess I would believe that he would do that. It didn't feel that out of character for him at this point. I think he would do that.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it's not a surprise. I mean, at this point, I know he's the Nazi big villain of the piece. So he's just doing that stuff. There's no like big twist or, knife in the back of the government. I mean, it would have been interesting if he betrayed the CIA and then they sent more people after him. So it's even a bigger global cat and mouse chase or something. But it's essentially the whole CIA connection. He could have just been a Nazi scientist who regrouped and came back and whatever. The whole space program thing. This movie is just full of MacGuffins that are just there to provide stuff so you don't notice all the other holes in what is actually going on. So I didn't care about any of that.
That's a great point. Oh gosh.
At the end of the tuk-tuk or the cart scene, their cart breaks down. They're like, well, now what are we going to do? I don't know. And my wife pointed this out. She said, why don't you just steal another one? Because you've already stolen 2 of them. Like, why is this a big problem all of a sudden?
Oh gosh, yeah. And again, I guess I just mentioned that it's just I have a hard time believing Indiana Jones do that. When I saw that in the trailer, I couldn't see Indy's face clearly because clearly it's a CGI or stuntman doing it. So I was like, oh, that's another flashback, right? And then it's an 80-year-old Harrison Ford doing that, jumping from one to another. It was whatever. One thing about Voller, I do like the idea of we've had Nazis backed by the power of the Third Reich. I like seeing rogue Nazis. That's kind of fun as a different crinkle because you have to do Nazis in an Indiana Jones movie. They tried to branch out in Temple and Kingdom, and everyone was like, "No, don't do that." So you have to do Nazis. So you have to. So now we're just dealing with different shades of Nazis, and I think that's fun. And Mads Mikkelsen delivers his lines well. I feel like I'm being very hard on the way they treat his character, but I want to say that adding Mads Mikkelsen to a movie, even a bad movie with a bad character, he elevates it.
Well, also, and this gets towards, I'm not going to get spoiler, but at the end of the movie, he sort of loses his composure. And that's like a freaked out Mads Mikkelsen is something that I can't say that I've really seen before. He's pretty cool, calm, and collected, but to see him have that moment of like, oh, there's this thing, that I can't control that I thought I was in control like a minute ago. What am I going to do? That was kind of nice to see too. Yeah. Again, I liked his performance. I just hated the material.
Yeah, I agree completely. Again, Tangier auction. I already mentioned Helen's an asshole, has no morals, all that stuff. I can't remember. I don't have a note, so I'll just mention it here. The reason I didn't include in my little checklist no sexual tension and no sex in the film was because there is sexual tension. It's with Helena and every single guy that she sees in the film, which again is kind of the movie misunderstanding strong female character a little bit. I don't know how much I should elaborate on this. I feel like, I'm kind of stepping on eggshells here because I'm not a woman. But it just feels weird that that's the movie is like, oh, she's strong, so therefore she is very promiscuous.
Well, and that gets back to the whole kind of thing. Like, well, if men action stars can do this, then so can women. But that's the thing is like, that wasn't Indiana Jones. He had romances, but he's not like side-eyeing every female who comes across his purview, right?
Yeah.
This character does not fit, and it doesn't really make sense. I mean, if you look at these big popular heroes and brands or whatever, there seems to be a misconception. I'm convinced that most of the people who are trying to critique and deconstruct these films have never watched them. They've just heard about them from their friends or their professors or whatever, like male gaze, patriarchy, all this other stuff. Like, oh, it's got to be terrible. We've got to tear it all down. Like, no, actually watch the movies and see the nuance and see how the male and female characters interacted in those films, and then just bring that to life. Because you could make something out of this archetype, the goddaughter and Indy, not sexual tension, obviously, but an actual relationship that you believe would work, but they don't do that here.
There's something, this speaks to my disappointment with the film. There's a line in the trailer where he says, I think it's like an amalgam of a bunch of different lines that they cut like they do in so many trailers. He says, I've been shot, I've been tortured with voodoo, but I've been looking for this my whole life. And I was like, wouldn't that be beautiful if what he's talking about is his relationship with his goddaughter? Oh, that would be sweet. I don't buy that because she's an asshole. I don't even think they bonded really in this film. I don't see them hanging out after this.
What if, again, I'm rewriting the movie. What if it opens, with Indy getting the news that Mutt has been killed, or even a flashback to Indy having that conversation with his son about like, Mutt's like, I'm going to enlist. And Indy's like, I just have a feeling about this war. It's not like other wars, whatever. And Mutt's like, I'm going to go, Dad. It's the right thing to do, before people kind of knew about the problems with Vietnam as a whole. Gets the news that his son's dead. Goes off on this adventure to find the dial of destiny because he believes he can make things right. And he goes back, he tracks down Helena because he's like, that's the other missing piece of my life. I left you to, your demented father. Forgive me. Let's go find this thing together because maybe we can fix both of our lives. We can bring back my son and I can, or maybe I can bring back my son and then go back and help raise you or something, or show your dad that he wasn't crazy and support him so he doesn't have to go nuts and you can have a healthy family. That's it's all about family stuff that all these movies are trying to get to, but actually has heart, and there's a lot of adventure potential in that stuff.
Yeah, and I would love the idea of then they realize, kind of like the Flash a little bit. Now we're referencing the Flash so much, but yeah, they learn that like the best thing for everybody is not to bring back her dead dad and not to bring back his dead son. But along the way, they realize they have a bond now with each other, and they're going to be okay because now they have each other. They didn't do any of that in this film. Holy shit.
No. And then maybe at the end, if you had a more, again, likable character, likable actress, they could say, hey, let's team up and go on adventures. And then Indy says, look, I'm too old for this. You take the whip and the hat. And then you don't piss off anybody the way that these alleged test screening footages would have.
Yeah. Oh, we're so close. So let's just barrel through this next part, and then we'll get to the fun stuff. Antonio Banderas is a fun addition to any movie. He seems like he's perfect for an Indiana Jones film. I don't really have any complaints with him just playing hey, I know someone in this random country, because of course Indiana Jones does. Antonio Banderas is the perfect age to be someone who's still in the action, but he was more in his prime maybe 20 years ago. Anytime I'm a younger person, as you know, Ian. So anytime Antonio Banderas speaks, I can't help but think of the cat Puss in Boots. Then there's a scene whenever he like belts out a line or something, and I'm like, that's just Puss in Boots right there. It's so fun. I'm like literally like picturing like, oh, Puss in Boots is on the adventure now. I love it.
And I also thought, like, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was such a great movie. Can I just stop and go back and watch that again?
I know. I will watch that a billion times more than I'll probably ever watch this. If I ever rewatch this again, it's just because I'm a completionist and I'm like, well, I guess I have to watch all 5 in my rewatch. So Antonio Banderas makes anything better. I like him in the movie, no complaints. Then it goes wrong whenever Voller shows up and kills. I believe he kills Antonio Banderas, right? Yeah. And then Helena almost joins the Nazis, and they have done such a horrible job setting up her character and a horrible job developing her character to this point where I legitimately thought, yep, she would. Yep, that's about right.
Yeah, because I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, you really are just gonna plumb the depths, scrape the barrel, but then of course she shows up with the secret stick of dynamite somehow. And she bums a cigarette from a guy and she secrets it behind her back to light the dynamite stick. if you bum a cigarette from someone and you're having a conversation with them, you're like, why are you not smoking that at
Can you
all?
give me
And
my
could you give it,
cigarette back?
yeah, could you give it back? Because you've had it for about 2 minutes.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about how impractical that would be. Yeah, if I'm ever like bombing a cigarette off of somebody, I don't put it behind my back and then continue talking. I'd be like, "What are you doing with my cigarette right now? You can keep it." Uh,
Well, she talks out of her ass. Maybe she smokes out of it too. I don't know.
Indy gets shot and should die right then and there, but he does not die. And I guess, is there anything else you want to talk? We already talked about Antonio Banderas, Helena almost joining the Nazis. We're right about to get to the fun stuff. Do you want to keep going, or do you have anything to say about Indiana Jones getting shot?
Well, just briefly, like the whole boat scene, because they do this dive underwater. They, it's a callback to Indy's fear of snakes because there's eels in the water.
Oh
They
yeah.
get this, they get the second part of the dial, which is something I don't think we've talked about. Again, this is another Star Wars and even the last Transformers movie thing. The MacGuffin is very video gamey. It's like we got to get the thing, but it's actually there's two parts that we have to
Mhm.
find. Then we have to find the thing that's actually a map that leads to the second thing and whatever. But so they go on this boat, they go diving to find the second piece of the dial. When they come back up, the Nazis have taken a powerboat to this boat and kill everybody on the boat. And as Indy and Short Round Two, whatever his name was, Teddy, that was his name, and Helena make their escape, she's all like laughing and cackling. And Indy's like, all of my friends just got murdered on that boat. And she's like, oh, well, anyway. And then, like, she's one note throughout this entire thing, except for the very end where it's like, okay, we can't be complete monsters. We have to give her a little bit of emotion, but it's far too late by that point.
Yeah, and I hope nobody ever, no Disney shill, no movie critic that likes everything, nobody that defends these movies better give me any shit for saying she's unlikable and I hate her, because the movie does not help her out at all. Like in scenes like that, like what am I supposed to think, if anything else, other than this character is an asshole? Indiana Jones, I spent 4 movies with him. I'm here to see him. His friend's dead, and he's sad about it. And Indiana Jones sells that well, that emotion well. He's a great actor. Or sorry, Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford sells that emotion well. And then she's like, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I'm like, don't ever say this is Rose Tico, Ray Skywalker. Like this is on another level. This is like, oh my God.
And it's not like she stops and reflects because she's like, oh, that's right, I need to absorb what happened, I was on an adrenaline high that we escaped, whatever. She just kind of stops. You get the feeling because she was scolded.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing of like, I don't really care, but it's not appropriate to
Right.
keep going.
Yeah, it's not because she's doing any reflection. It's because of the social taboo. So now we're here. We're at the big thing that I think everybody's going to be talking about. The whole like the main thing. They're aliens jump in the shark. Indiana Jones survive at a nuclear explosion. That's a little jump in the shark. You know what's not jumping the shark, according to Disney? Going back to the BC times, because they have Indiana Jones. So they got the 2 planes, which clearly the 2 planes is a setup. One's going to be the escape plane. One's not going to be the escape plane. I knew it from the moment they did it. No suspense. So that they take away some suspense from me. They get the two pieces of the dial together. Voller wants to go back in time, and he's taken injured Indiana Jones with him. He should be dead for like 20 minutes ago at this point. Helena jumps on the thing too. It's a very riveting scene where she rides a motorcycle to get on the plane. Anyways, long story short, they go back in time, but the wrong coordinates. So they go back to Archimedes, the guy who I think made the dial, and Indiana Jones he wants to stay back in time. Helena won't let him. They meet Archimedes. And then she knocks him out, and Voller dies in an explosion. There's a lot there. I hate all of it, though. So, Ian, what was running through your mind as this was happening?
So much to cover. I mean, I like the conceit that the dial does not work as intended, because Voller thinks that, and this is the weird thing about this movie, is that the dial does not. Voller keeps talking about throughout the film that they conquered space the same way they're going to conquer time, through math. I'm like, what? How does math open up a time portal? Turns out it doesn't. What the dial does, it doesn't open up a time portal. What it does is it helps you locate these rifts in time that are just hanging out in the sky. apparently. And it's a total like Donnie Darko moment where there's just like this black hole of clouds in the sky, and there's a plane flying into it. I mean, it's just the climax of Donnie Darko. But they go through this portal and they show up on the other side, almost like at Themyscira, it looks like from Wonder Woman. There's a battle going on. It turns out because Voller thought he was going to go back to the end of the war. And since we're kind of talking spoilers and stuff,
Sure.
he was going to kill Hitler because he's like, Hitler was a loser. He lost.
Yeah.
If I were in charge, I'd be able to, take the Reich to its full heights and all that stuff. Interesting idea, because he wanted to kill Hitler, which is what everybody kind of wants, but he also wanted to take control. So it'd been interesting to see how that all played out in terms of history.
Yeah.
Would he have been successful? But turns out they can only go back to Archimedes' time because he created the dial as like an SOS call. It's like, hey, anybody from the future can come help us against the Romans or whatever that is going on. First of all, was he anticipating this siege? Like, how long does it take to put this dial, this mathematical piece of wizardry together? Because it seems very specific. Like, I know 6 months from now, there's going to be a giant battle that we're going to need an SOS call for.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But so they go, Voller crash lands his plane. Before that, the Nazi henchmen are shooting bullets and like rapid fire machine guns out at the soldiers in the battle. And I'm like, okay, it's one thing in that when they recover one of the pieces of the dial, I think, from Archimedes' corpse in a tomb, there's a wristwatch that's buried with him. And that's when we first get the inkling that the time travel works. However, in this climactic scene on the beach with the Romans fighting whoever, the plane crashes.
Mm-hmm.
A warplane crashes with Nazi corpses, Nazi technology, bullets, everything. How has this not been discovered by anybody in history? When they first started shooting bullets, I'm like, okay, maybe the casings went into the sea. That's how they didn't discover. But you see a giant beached, burnt out plane with Voller, who, when we see him going down the plane, he's sitting right in the cockpit. He would have been pancaked like a smear. And yet we just see his body is like kind of like humped over a piece of the fuselage. He's kind of burned. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. None of it. And okay, you talked about the second plane to go back. First of all, we have to talk about Sad Sack Indy. He gets more pathetic as the movie goes on. He's like, no, I just want to stay here. It's not even like he wants to stay there to die. It's almost like he thinks he's going to be okay and he'd like to live out his life there. Even though this is before like time travel became a thing in popular culture, really, he should understand somewhat the ramifications of sticking around in a place where he doesn't belong. Because if he talks to anybody about anything, unless he decides to just live as a monk and not talk to anyone, he's going to change the course of human history.
Yeah.
What? He's dumb. And he's like given up on everything because he has nothing to go back to. The rest of the movie wasn't about that. That was information that came out 2 hours ago. It's not a thread running through the entire film at all. So it just comes out of the blue. Like, wait, Indy's giving up? What? Where's my hero again? So Helena knocks him out. He wakes up in New York City. Now, there is a full-scale war going on. They had a hard enough time getting everybody to that little clearing of the beach because you can still see the fighting. There are arrows and all sorts of stuff going on. Yeah. I'm supposed to believe that they dragged Indy. They fit 4 people into this, what's at best a 2-seater plane, then got them back up to 88 miles per hour or whatever the hell it is to get through that rift and not get shot down. Like, there's a 20-minute action sequence that is necessary to the understanding of the story that is completely dealt in a blackout.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. The getting them back. Yeah. That getting, as soon as you started to say that the portal's way up there and you got to fly up, I was like, oh yeah, they were on the ground when we went to the blackout. So how did they get back in the plane, get back up all the way through? But
it's a beach next to some rocky mountains. Where do they get the clearance to get the plane? And there's people shooting at them.
Yeah, we need to. Whenever I hypothetically go back and watch the movie, which I never will, but I'll check. I should pay attention to where the plane, the getaway plane lands, and see if they could turn that baby around and have enough to get off. Because I doubt it. Yeah, there's a lot there. As a climax for the film, this is pretty weak. I gotta say, the villain gets destroyed. I mean, I guess that's kind of like the villain gets killed by his own hubris as a thing throughout Indiana Jones. But I just don't feel a level of satisfaction seeing Voller get killed. I don't see a level of satisfaction whenever Indy gets to meet Archimedes because I'm too distracted by how dumb this is. Indiana Jones should not be able to time travel. It's worse than, I don't know how do I need to make people understand this is worse than getting in getting to meet aliens. This is worse than getting in a refrigerator and surviving a nuke, as bad as those things are. And then now as we go into the ending, this is clearly a reshoot because I think that we've kind of deduced from this point that they were going to have Indiana Jones stay in the in BC times. Helena was going to come back and then be our new Indiana Jones going forward, or maybe take up the mantle, and I've heard some rumors is even go as far as say Indiana Jones gets erased from history. I don't know if that's true. That was a rumor though going into this.
Well, yeah, and I've heard many things, and Mangold's denied this. I think Kathleen Kennedy and like all the people have denied this, but I've learned that never trust anybody when they're out promoting a movie. You're going to get the truth from them a few years down the line. For example, James Cameron said that Terminator Genesis was the Terminator 3 that he had always imagined. Okay. But the whole thing, one of the endings that I had heard, and this was back when apparently the Dial of Destiny was more of a time travel MacGuffin and not like it will only take you to this one specific point in history, which is dumb, was that Indy, I don't remember if he dies or if he gives up or something, but essentially Helena takes over the mantle of Indiana Jones. And there was at one point a montage of scenes from the original trilogy, except it's her like getting the golden idol in the beginning. It's her running from the boulder. It's her meeting up with, I don't know if it, maybe it's her and Toby Jones, like as her dad, like in Last Crusade. I don't know. This is, again, everyone's denied this, but I'd heard that there was, test screening where some of this footage was shown and it was like summarily booed for good reason, because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is not the next Indiana Jones.
Holy shit. And to set her up as the way they do in this film and to be like, here's your new Indiana Jones, that is such a misfire. Holy shit. So that's the only thing that could have made this movie work. I gotta say, this ending is better than that. This is better than that. But it's still bad. And I think the thing is, once they painted themselves into this corner, so they're doing as much to clean up the original ending as they can here, but still, it's just not good. Marion comes back out of nowhere and they get back together and they're like, instead it's like, was the writer's strike happening at this point? Because you just took a page from the Raiders script and pasted it into this movie. And I get it. It's a callback, Sam, but there's ways to do a callback. And this is not very elegant. My dad looked over to me and was like, that's from Raiders. I'm like, how young do you think I am? But it was a very bad ending. Sala is nice. It's cool to see him with the kids getting ice cream and stuff.
Why are they there?
Sala and the kids.
Yeah, they literally walk into Indy's apartment, Sala and his two children, and at that point, Helena says, "Okay, let's go get some ice cream." Why did Sala and his kids show up? There was no like, Indy, we're just about to come over and ask you to get ice cream. Or Indy, I've got this very important information to give to you, even though I think you're still unconscious. Like him waking up, he apparently, this is the first time he'd been, conscious since the adventure, right?
I was gonna say in centuries.
And centuries, literally. Yeah. But so again, Sala shows up and it just seemed like a sitcom moment. Like, we got to bring everybody back for the big final scene, but then Helena rushes them out the door to get ice cream or something. Yeah. And here's the thing: Marion, apparently this is the only time that we see her aside from like a photograph in a couple of places in the movie, but there's divorce papers. There's mention that things weren't the same since Mutt died, and they, it's not very amicable. But then she shows up and she's all like, "Oh, everything's great again." Huh? There's no like
come from.
Right. There's no like, I know we've had some trouble. We're going to work through this and everything. But no, there's the big sweeping romance. And at the end, some of the early kind of spoilery stuff had insinuated that at the end, there's like a close up of Indy's hat and there's a hand that reaches out for it. Maybe that was Helena's as like the passing the torch. But no, that wasn't Helena's hand. What happened was Marion and Indy are kind of like alone in their apartment, and then we go out the window and we see down the street Helena and Teddy are going off to some other adventure or something. Then we go back up to the balcony and we see a clothesline and Indy's hat is on it, and the hand reaches out from the window and grabs it. I think that's just Marion and Indy getting ready to get it on, and she likes the kink of the hat and possibly the whip.
Yeah, Marion sucks in the film. The use of Marion is horrible. I didn't like the fact that they're divorced at the beginning of the film. They don't resolve it. They just say it's resolved by the end of it. It's like it, and then also they do the same. Like I said before, they do not. He's still wanted for murder. Like that's got to be solved. He's gonna. The police are coming in the door like the next day and taking him to jail. What a horrible film. I just keep thinking about it. Like there's very few things that I'm going back to be like, okay, the opening had fun action to it. I like Indy on a horse, but although you've ruined that for me now. The Mads Mikkelsen is fun in anything you put him in. And as I compare it to Crystal Skull, I'm like, well, who's a better sidekick, Mutt or Helena? Probably Helena, or probably Mutt. Who's better? I do like Kate Blanchett though, probably and the Soviets a little bit more. Now that I got to say, do you like time travel or aliens? I prefer aliens. Do you like which one has worse CG? Probably this movie over Crystal Skull. That's hard to say. I'm trying on every conceivable in every conceivable way. I think this is the worst Indiana Jones film.
Here's the thing, and I agree with you, but I keep going back to the what ifs. All right, 2 what if scenarios, one involving Marion and the other involving Crystal Skull. If you want to create some continuity here, you've got aliens. All right, there is evidence that aliens exist. And you've also got Paperclip with the government working with the Nazis.
Right.
What if the Nazis somehow, our Voller friend takes alien technology and is able to retrofit it to create this time travel device and then needs to be stopped? Maybe he creates one and Indy comes across the dial of destiny and there's like a competing race against time or something like that. I don't know if that would even work, but at least have some continuity and also involve like a bridge between these 2 stories of like the alien technology. What can that do? Because they can travel space. Maybe they can conquer time, and maybe we use that for various purposes. Retro engineering, as I'll call them, conspiracy theorists refer to it. But also with Marion, going back to the idea of that we kind of talked about earlier. What if Indy wanted to travel back in time to save Mutt? Maybe the movie opens with them in grief because Mutt has died, and it causes conflict in the relationship, and she's overstricken with grief because her son is dead or whatever. And Indy's like, look, kind of like the Pet Cemetery thing, like I have a way to bring him back, but I'm gonna have to go away for a while. And then he comes back because he realizes maybe that it didn't work, or that's not what he really needs or something. And he comes back and he thinks that he's failed on some level. And then she kind of consoles him, is like, we're going to be okay. We're going to move on. I hate to use this phrase, but stronger together. And then it ends. And, maybe the nurturing relationship with Helena is not a substitute for that, but she kind of gets adopted into their kind of found family and they can all move on together. A nice bow on what should have only been a trilogy.
Yeah. Indiana Jones says to Marion, don't worry, we will build back better.
No.
That's great. And then she says, no, I want to make America great again. And then they break up over the 2016 presidential election.
There you go.
All right. So what I hate about having you on, Ian, and thank you for coming on the show. This has been great. What I hate about having you on is I
talk too much. I get it.
No. You talk, and when you come up with better what if scenarios than the movie. Like not only one, but like a bunch of different alternatives that they could have taken at any given time along the production process of this film. It makes me just more disappointed in the movie.
I'm sorry, and I'm ecstatic to be on. So thanks, ecstatic. I butchered that word.
You butchered it. How dare you? No, I'm kidding. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Ian. Thank you so much. I think that this has been a great discussion of this movie, and I feel like I've just had a great therapy session. Like I just got out all the anger that I had towards this film, and as you could probably tell, there was a lot of anger. Would you like to tell people about Kicking the Seat, kickseat.com, what you do, and where they can find it?
Well, you can find me at kickseat.com. I mostly do stuff on YouTube now. So if you look up Kicking the Seat on YouTube, you'll find me there. It's actually, we're going to be coming up on 5 years at the middle of July. So that's very exciting. I do, roundtable reviews, interviews, film reviews, all that good stuff. So yeah, happy to have you come check it out, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, occasionally write stuff, which you can find at Kicking the Seat and Rotten Tomatoes and all that good stuff.
All right, Ian Simmons, the website is kickseat.com, Kicking the
That's right.
Seat on YouTube. Of course, I'll have links in the description of this video. Ian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
And if you want to follow me on the various social media sites, I'm at Samuel D. Carrico on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at the Film Fanclub on Facebook and TikTok. Got a podcast feed. We're reviewing all the Mission Impossible movies on the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you want to check it out. And if you want to hear these discussions live, follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/The Film Fan Club. The next episode of The Film Fan Club is the season finale, so please join us then. I've been Sam Carrico. Thanks for watching.